How many fish did you eat this year? Was it 138 by any chance? Because that's the number of fish that us humans kill every year per person on average. The global fish and seafood industry is pretty crazy and ripe for disruption. Let's check it out. Hello world! This is the Impact Investing Show, where we think and learn about how to save the world and improve the lives of all conscious creatures by acting today and investing into the future. I'm Leonard Shelter, welcome to the show. So the fish and seafood industry is one of the major players in our global food system, but it's also one of the main contributors to our oceans dying. It's a highly unsustainable industry, especially in the face of our growing human population. But luckily for us, a big disruption is already on the way. Cultured seafood is already here. So now we're going to look at the global fish production, the industry, how sustainable it is, the market size, and ultimately the companies that already produce cultured seafood today. Let's get into it. But first we have to get some definitions straight. By fish and seafood, I mean everything that lives in the water. That means fish, crustaceans, but also mollusks and algae. I made another video on the global meat market, which you can check out right here, which is concerned with all the animals living on land. So without further ado, let's get right into it. The global annual fish and seafood production is around 200 million tons per year. China produces 62 million tons of that, followed by Indonesia with 12 million tons. And for comparison, we have Japan, which is very famous for its fish consumption, which only produces 3.8 million tons per year. The production of fish and seafood has quadrupled over the last 50 years, and people nowadays eat about twice as much fish as they did just 50 years ago. In this graph, you can see the amount of seafood captured globally per year. Wild catch, which means fish that is caught in the wild, in the ocean or in fresh waters, is basically flat since the 1990s, and it's only about 90 million tons per year. So where does all the fish come from? Well, people realized this demand, of course, and they did to fish what they did to land animals. Instead of hunting, they introduced basically factory farming. So for seafood, factory farming is called aquaculture. So here you can also see the production of aquaculture. And as you can see, it's on a steady rise since the 1990s, and basically all growth of the entire sector happens in aquaculture. So what exactly is aquaculture? Aquaculture is the controlled cultivation or farming of aquatic organisms. That works for fish, crustaceans, but also mollusks and algae. It can be done in sweet or in salt water, on or offshore, and it usually includes the stocking, feeding, and protection from predators of the fish or seafood that you want to produce. However, it has a number of issues. First of all, some fish are carnivorous. That means you need to feed them forage fish in order to keep them healthy and keep them growing. Nowadays, about 50% of global fish oil production is fed to farmed salmon. An important number here is the FIFO number. FIFO stands for fish in, fish out. And for salmon, the FIFO ratio is about 1.9. That means for every 1 pound of salmon that you produce, you first have to feed these salmon in your farmed aquaculture 1.9 pounds of forage fish. A recommendation of the sector is to move more towards plant-based feed for the fish in order to reduce the amount of fish you need to feed them. And this recommendation of basically just eating more plants would be quite a good recommendation for humans as well, I think. Other important issues of aquaculture are obviously animal welfare. These fish are really tightly packed, which means they suffer from aggression, competitive behavior, even cannibalism sometimes, feed competition, and abrasion from skin when the fish rub together so much. The reduced water flow in these aquacultures leads to less oxygen and reduced waste removal, so the fish are basically swimming in their excrement. It also helps parasites and infestations spread, and overall these fish experience extreme stress all the time, which further facilitates disease. In terms of ecosystem damage, a single aquaculture farm of about 200,000 fish produces as much waste as 60,000 people. And this waste is dumped right into the ocean without any treatment. The Indonesian shrimp farms, for example, are a good example. They are usually abandoned after just 10 years due to toxin buildup and nutrient loss. I think that says enough about the ecological impacts. Aquaculture is often hailed as the great new ecological invention. But basically it's just factory farming at sea, just call it what it really is. It's a horrible idea and not in the least ecologically viable. But what about the sustainability of this industry? Here, definitions really matter. On the one hand, you have ecological sustainability, which aims at restoring historic levels of fish stock and would lead to almost no fishing allowances anymore. On the other hand, you have economic sustainability, which aims at fishing as much as possible without decreasing the fish stock further. Today, we just look at economic sustainability. In this graph, you can see how sustainably global fish stocks are fished. The red is pretty clear, it's overfished, which means the fish stocks are continually declining. The light blue on the left is also clear. These stocks are underfished, which means they are healthy, growing populations, which you could get more economic value out of if you fished more. The gray part is interesting. It means maximally fished, but what about it? In economic terms, everything is fine. They are sustainably fished, all is good. But in reality, these stocks are at their absolute maximum capacity. There is no growth, it's just bare survival and constant numbers of animals. These fish stocks are very vulnerable to changes in their environment. So what about climate change, predators, or diseases? Is this really sustainable? I think it's rather a walk on the razor's edge. And that's on top of 34% of obviously unsustainable fishing. A market research report that I read in preparation of this video stated it quite clearly. It said, "Depletion of sea species has restrained the market growth." This describes the state of the industry quite well. The industry knows exactly what they are doing and how it will continue. I don't really have much to add to that. Now let's look at greenhouse gas emissions. Aquaculture is again often hailed as this new, environmentally friendly option. But in this graph you can see the kilograms of greenhouse gas emitted per kilogram of seafood. For reference, chicken, the most efficient land animal in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, is also included with 8 kilograms. So shrimp caught in the wild is horrible. Farmed shrimp is still horrible. Seaweed is surprisingly the best option. So maybe we should all just eat more plants. Crazy idea, I know. A small addition, you all know the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. You know, this big pile of plastic straws in the Pacific Ocean. It's 1.6 million square kilometers in size and it has 79,000 tons of plastic. But guess what? 46% of that is fishing nets. So use as many plastic straws as you like, I don't care. It's not gonna matter as long as the fishing industry is around. No, actually don't do that. It's a compounding problem. That was a joke. Don't use plastic straws. But enough of these depressing numbers, let's talk business. The global fish and seafood market is estimated at $159 billion in 2019, with a compound annual growth rate of 2.5% from 2020 to 2027. That means it could grow to $193 billion in 2027. Of that, about $125 billion would come from fish and the rest from other sea life. That is significantly smaller than the global meat market at $1.2 trillion. I found a weird report in preparation for this video that said the cultured seafood market would be $280 million in 2028 and $58 million right now in 2021. But that can't really be. I have no idea where they got these numbers because there's not a single company in the world selling cultured seafood right now. So remember kids, always check your sources. So guess what? The big disruption is coming. There is no need to catch a fish or to farm a fish in the future if you want to eat one. You can just grow it from cells. There's no catching, no killing, no ocean pollution involved anymore. It's just clean, high-quality fish without any of the negative consequences. The process is very similar to the production of cultured meat, but cultured fish has a couple of advantages. One of them is less energy demand, because fish cells can be cultured at room temperature, whereas mammal cells require 37 degrees Celsius. The fish cells are also more robust, they are more tolerant to varying oxygen levels, and they also have a simpler structure. Not the cells, but the tissue. It is mostly muscle tissue, so that is much simpler to mimic than mammalian meat. There are already several companies producing cell-based seafood today. First up there is Blue Nalu. They focus on obscure and expensive fish first, like bluefin tuna, mahi-mahi, and yellowtail amberjack, whatever that is, in order to develop a platform that they can then scale up for mass production later on. They don't use any fetal bovine growth serum, which is a great advantage, and they have a facility plan to produce 18 million pounds of cultured fish, which they plan to sell in about 1 to 2 years. Currently, their sushi rolls cost about $200, but that price is expected to fall below $5. Then there is wild type. They produce and tasted cultivated salmon already and want to produce sushi grade salmon from cells which are harvested and then later seeded into a plant-based structure to grow into the fish tissue. Then there is Finless Foods, which is a plant-based and cell-cultured startup for tuna. And there is Blue Biosciences from Berlin in Germany. These are the biggest players in the space right now. None of them are public yet and none of them are profitable, so not much to invest in yet. Sorry. So to summarize, we kill about 1 trillion fish each year and 70% of our fisheries are overfished or at maximum capacity. Aquaculture in particular is not a viable solution and fishing industry overall is pretty horrible. Aquaculture is no better than factory farming. Let's call it what it is. It's industrial factory farming, with factories at sea. Wow, big innovation there. Anyhow, cell-based fish and seafood is already here, and the benefits in environmental concerns, health issues and animal welfare are just outstanding. In 2027, the global fish and seafood market is projected to reach almost $200 billion. But I doubt that that's gonna come from wild catch or even farmed fish. It's a dying industry trying to fix what was never working. And good riddance. We don't need an industry polluting, emptying, destroying our oceans with a horrible animal welfare situation. And I'm not talking about small-scale subsistence fishermen in developing countries here. This critique is aimed at large industrial companies and factory farms at sea. They will become uneconomical so fast that the industry won't believe it. And that is a great step forward for humanity, the planet, and especially for all marine life. So if you want to learn more about the cellular agriculture space or just stay up to date with all the current news and investment opportunities, stick around because that's exactly what we are going to talk about on this channel. See you in the next one.